I don't see the danger, but I feel it. I feel the ground tremble, the air grow even colder, and the dense, wild scent that precedes death. Anya, the blind Yakutian elder, clutched her bone-carved staff, her heart beating an ancestral rhythm that echoed the icy vastness. The guttural roar of 5 gigantic polar bears tore through the silence of the frozen tundra, and she knew, with the cold certainty of 1,000 winters, they were coming for the last reindeer herd, her village's only hope. Without sight to guide her steps, but with the fury and wisdom of her ancestors coursing through her veins, Anya would have to find a way, or everything would be irremediably lost beneath death's white veil. Anya felt the intense cold of responsibility weigh on her shoulders, colder than Yakutia's air. Her wrinkled fingers tightened around the staff, the cold wood transmitting a strange strength. It wasn't just the reindeer's lives at stake, but the very soul of her people, the flame that warmed their hearts against the eternal winter. She turned her face into the wind, not to see, but to feel the direction of the threat. The scent of snow and ice now mingled with a strong, wild, unmistakable odor. Bears. Gigantic, as her grandparents' tales described, creatures of legend that rarely dared to approach the village so closely. A small, trembling hand touched her arm. It was Lena, her granddaughter, a girl of just 10 winters whose large, dark eyes reflected the fear of the entire community. "Grandma Anya, they are many. What will we do?" Lena's voice was an almost inaudible whisper, but Anya felt the anguish behind the words. The elder placed her hand over her granddaughter's, a gesture of comfort and firmness. "Do not fear, little one. Our ancestors gave us wisdom. The earth speaks to us, and we will listen." Anya turned, guided by the vibrations of the ground and the distant sound of the bear's heavy footsteps, which seemed to make the tundra itself tremble. She knew that the village hunters, few and with rudimentary weapons, would stand no chance against 5 beasts of that size and ferocity. The defense would not be with brute force, but with cunning, with a deep knowledge of every crevice, every elevation, every air current that shaped the landscape. She needed to use nature itself as her ally. Her plan began to form, an invisible web of sounds and traps that only she could weave. She envisioned the terrain, the underground river that ran beneath a thin layer of ice to the east, the rock formations that amplified echoes. "Lena," Anya said, her voice now stronger, "go to the younger ones. Tell them to gather the wind chimes, the hollow horns, and the hide drums we keep for celebrations. Bring them to the east side of the herd, near the highest rocky elevation, and ask them to prepare the bonfires, but don't light them yet, just the dry wood." Lena's eyes widened, confused, but the determination on her grandmother's blind face was unquestionable. Chimes? Drums? But Grandma, what for? Anya smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, but conveyed a strange peace. "To dance with the wind, my child, to confuse those who do not see with their hearts." The fear in Lena's eyes gave way to a spark of hope, a childlike trust in the elder's wisdom. The girl nodded and ran, her small feet sinking into the snow. Anya remained motionless for a moment, absorbing her surroundings. The bear's roar was closer now, a guttural warning that chilled the blood. She could feel their hunger, a palpable energy that spread through the air. Her lips moved in a silent prayer to the ancestors, asking for strength and clarity. Her blindness, which many saw as a weakness, was in fact a door to other senses, a deeper connection to the invisible world. She could see the danger approaching, not with her eyes, but with her soul, with every fiber of her being. The village's fate rested on her keen perception, on her ability to transform the invisible into a weapon. She raised her staff, pointing it in the direction of the bears, as if she could trace a safe path through the imminent darkness, a path only she could see. She felt the earth vibrate beneath her feet, a premonition not of fear, but of an ancient urgency. Her thin lips curved into a firm line. The village depended on her, and the wisdom of the ancestors was her only guide. Lena returned in a few minutes, not alone, but accompanied by a group of young people, their faces pale and their eyes wide with apprehension. Among them was Boris, a strong lad of 16 winters who usually led the small hunting parties. He carried a stack of wind chimes made of bone and wood, and others brought reindeer hide drums and hollow horns, all the objects Anya had requested. The sound of the chimes rattled softly with their movement, a strange contrast to the heavy silence of the tundra. "Grandma Anya, we brought what you asked for," Boris said, his voice a little hoarse with tension. "But chimes and drums against such large bears?" Doubt was palpable in his voice, echoing the sentiment of all the young people. They were accustomed to physical strength, to the spear and the bow, not to the melody of the wind. Anya slowly turned towards Boris's voice, her wrinkled face expressing a deep calm. "Brute force fails where cunning prevails, my young one. The bears see with their eyes, but we will feel with our souls, and we will make them feel what they cannot see." She extended a hand, and Lena, understanding, placed one of the wind chimes in her grandmother's palm. Anya touched it, feeling the rough texture of the bone, the icy metal. "These chimes," she explained, her voice soft but laden with authority, "will be our eyes and ears. Hang them on low branches and rocks, forming a circle around the herd, on the east side, near the highest rocky elevation. Not too close to each other, so the sound spreads and confuses, and the drums and horns." She paused, the scent of the bears growing stronger, almost unbearable. "Will be used to create an echo, a wall of sound that will disorient them." Despite the initial confusion, Anya's unwavering confidence began to seep into the young people's hearts. They exchanged glances, and then, with a nod from Boris, began to move. Lena, with her small stature, helped tie the chimes to thin branches and position the drums. The agile hands of the young people worked quickly, fear transformed into action. They dug small holes in the hardened snow to fix the hollow horns, creating natural resonators. Anya walked among them, her staff tapping the ground, her ears catching every sound, every vibration. "More to the right, Boris. The night wind will carry the sound that way," she instructed, with a precision that surprised everyone. "Lena, make sure the drums are facing east. We want the sound to travel towards them, not away." Her fingers brushed the snow, feeling the slope of the terrain, the density of the ice. As the chimes began to be hung, a faint sound of rattling metal and bone mingled with the wind. The bears were close, their roar now a distant thunder that made chests vibrate. The wild scent was so intense it seemed to burn their nostrils, and the young people instinctively flinched. But Anya did not waver. Her closed eyes seemed to see more than theirs. "The bonfires! Light them now!" Anya commanded, her voice suddenly louder and more urgent. "Not to warm us, but to create dancing shadows and smoke, to deceive their eyes, just as we will deceive their ears." The flames crackled in the growing darkness, casting flickering lights on anxious faces. The village, united by fear and hope, worked under the invisible baton of their blind elder, preparing for the strangest battle they had ever faced. With each chime hung, each drum positioned, each flame lit, they wove Anya's web, a defense made of sound, shadow, and unwavering faith in ancestral wisdom. The fate of the herd, and of all of them, now lay in the hands of the earth and in Anya's ears. The air trembled with anticipation, a heavy silence broken only by the crackling of the bonfires and the occasional rattle of a wind chime, stirred by a treacherous breeze. Anya remained in the center of the small clearing, her staff firmly planted in the snow, like an anchor amidst the impending storm. She could feel the bears now, Not just their scent and vibration, but a massive, hungry presence approaching like a slow avalanche. There were 5, each a colossus of strength and instinct, and their hunger was an additional cold that radiated through the environment, chilling even the soul. Lena and Boris were near her, their eyes fixed on the darkness from where the predators would come. The other young people, strategically positioned around the reindeer herd, awaited Anya's signal, their hands trembling over the drums and horns. Fear was a knot in everyone's throat, but the elders' calm presence was a balm, a silent promise that they were not alone. Suddenly, a deep, guttural roar tore through the air, closer than ever. It was a sound that promised destruction, and the young people flinched, their hearts leaping in their chests. But Anya did not move. Instead, an almost imperceptible smile touched her thin lips. "Now," she whispered, her voice laden with a silent urgency. "Sound the drums and horns. Let the sound dance with the flames." Boris, with a nervous nod, gave the signal. The drums began to beat, an irregular but strong rhythm echoing through the rock formations. The hollow horns were blown, producing a deep, resonant sound that mingled with the already rattling wind chimes. The effect was immediate and surprising. The sound was not harmonious, but chaotic, a cacophony that seemed to come from all directions at once. The bonfires, now more intense, cast giant dancing shadows, transforming rocks and trees into ghostly figures that moved with the wind. Anya felt the change in the air. The gigantic bears, accustomed to the tundra's silence, to the clear sound of their prey, were caught by surprise. She felt the hesitation in their heavy steps, the confusion in their movements. One of the bears, the largest, who seemed to lead the group, let out a roar of frustration, a sound that was once a threat, now of perplexity. He was disoriented, his keen senses unable to decipher the origin of the invisible attack. "They don't understand," Anya murmured to Lena and Boris, her blind eyes fixed on a distant point only she could see. "They seek a source, but will find only echoes and ghosts." Lena's heart pounded, no longer just from fear, but from growing admiration. She saw the gigantic silhouettes of the bears in the gloom, their movements uncertain, their heads turning from side to side, trying to locate the threat. The sound traps were working. Boris, seeing the plan's effectiveness, began to instruct the other young people with more confidence, coordinating the drum beats and horn blasts, creating waves of sound that seemed to push the bears away from the herd. The reindeer, in turn, were agitated, but the sound seemed to keep them closer to the center, away from immediate danger. Anya raised her staff again, not to point, but like an invisible conductor. "Maintain the rhythm," she instructed. "They will try to flank. Feel the wind. It will tell you where to go." She felt one of the bears try to bypass the wall of sound, moving further north. "More drums to the north. More horns," she commanded, her voice resonating with unquestionable authority. The young people responded promptly, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of the bonfires, their hearts filled with newfound courage. The battle was not of claws and teeth, but of senses. Anya, blind, was using her inner vision to guide her village against the beasts. Shadows danced, sounds echoed, and the bears, powerful in their brute strength, were lost in a labyrinth of false perceptions. The elder knew it was only the beginning, that hunger would make them more audacious, but the first barrier had been erected, an invisible wall of ancestral wisdom. The village's fate was being rewritten not with blood, but with the strange and powerful melody of human resilience. The bear's initial confusion gave way to a growing fury. Anya felt this in the changing vibration of the ground, in the intensification of the wild scent, which now carried notes of anger and impatience. One of the colossi, the same one that seemed to lead, let out a thunderous roar that made the bonfires flicker and the snow vibrate beneath the young people's feet. He was no longer just disoriented, he was irritated, and his gigantic mass began to move with a more defined purpose, ignoring the echoes and dancing shadows, seeking a breach. "He's coming straight for us," Lena whispered, grabbing Anya's arm. Her eyes, once filled with faint hope, now reflected terror again, seeing the massive silhouette of the bear advancing, breaking through the barrier of smoke and shadow. Boris, beside her, pressed his lips together, his hand instinctively reaching for the spear that wasn't there. Anya, however, remained serene. Her wrinkled fingers touched Lena's frightened face, a quick gesture of comfort. "Not directly, little one. He's testing. He wants us to reveal ourselves." She turned her head towards the roar, her ears catching not just the sound, but the intention behind it. Boris focused the drums in the center, but with a slower, deeper rhythm, and the horns used them to imitate the sound of the wind howling in the mountains, a sound they know, but one without origin. Boris, though still apprehensive, trusted the elder's wisdom. He gestured to the others, and the frantic drumming gave way to more spaced beats, but with a resonance that seemed to come from the very heart of the earth. The horns produced a long, melancholic wail, which mingled with the icy wind, creating an illusion of empty vastness. The wind chimes, in turn, continued to rattle, an erratic melody that seemed to float directionless. The bear, advancing with heavy steps, stopped abruptly. Anya felt its hesitation. The sound was no longer a direct attack, but a deceptive soundscape. The howling of the horns, so similar to the wind, seemed to have no specific source, and the drums, now deeper, gave the impression that the entire earth was in motion. He turned his head, sniffing the air, his small, dark eyes trying to penetrate the curtain of smoke and dancing shadows. The other four bears, who were further away, also seemed confused by the change in the sound pattern. They grouped together, their roars now more questioning than threatening. Anya's strategy was not to confront brute force, but to dismantle the predator's confidence, undermine their certainty, transforming their familiar environment into a nightmare of distorted perceptions. "They are losing patience," Anya said, her voice almost a whisper, but laden with a silent urgency. "Hunger will make them reckless. We need to guide them away from the herd, to where the ice is thin." She turned to Lena, her thin lips curving into an encouraging smile. "Little one, your voice is clear. Go to the east, near the underground river, call the reindeer with a soft, familiar sound, just enough for them to move a little to the west, away from the approaching danger." Lena swallowed hard, fear still present, but her trust in her grandmother was greater. She knew about the underground river, a treacherous place where the ice was a fragile shell over icy waters. It was the most vulnerable point, but also the most strategic. With a determined nod, she ran, her small figure disappearing into the gloom. Boris watched Lena go, then turned to Anya, his eyes filled with a new understanding. "Grandma, you want them to, fall?" Anya merely nodded, her wrinkled face serious. "Not to their death, my young one, only so they learn respect. So the earth teaches them not to steal our life." The idea was not to kill, but to drive them away, to frighten them, to show that the Yakutian community, even in its apparent fragility, possessed a strength that wild nature could not dominate. The village's survival did not depend on violence, but on a delicate dance with danger, guided by wisdom that transcended sight. Anya felt the lead bear take another hesitant step, its senses overwhelmed by confusion. The trap was being woven not of ropes but of sounds and perceptions, and the village's fate hung by an invisible thread. Lena ran, her small feet sinking into the soft snow, her heart pounding erratically in her chest. The icy air burned her lungs with each breath, and the distant roar of the bears seemed to pursue her. She remembered her grandmother's stories about the underground river, a treacherous place where the ice surface was deceptively thin, a natural trap for the unwary. The idea of luring the bears there, even if not to their death, filled her with a reverent dread. But Anya had spoken with such certainty, with such ancient wisdom, that Lena dared not doubt. She reached the edge of the rocky elevation, where the terrain began to slope gently towards the riverbed. The wind howled stronger there, carrying the damp scent of frozen water. Lena took a deep breath, trying to calm the trembling in her hands. She looked at the reindeer herd, which was more towards the center of the clearing, agitated by the sounds and shadows, but still safe. With a trembling voice, yet filled with a determination that surprised her, Lena began to emit a soft sound, a guttural call that the reindeer recognized. It was a sound her grandmother had taught her, an ancestral melody to calm and guide the animals. The reindeer raised their heads, their nostrils sniffing the air, and slowly, with hesitant steps, began to move a little further west, away from the imminent danger of the river. Anya, meters away, felt the change. The vibration of the reindeer's shifting steps, the soft sound of Lena's voice carried by the wind, all confirmed that the girl was fulfilling her part of the plan. More importantly, Anya felt the bear's reaction. The lead bear, which had previously been confused, now seemed to have detected the reindeer's movement and Lena's call. He let out a low growl and began to move more quickly, no longer hesitant, but drawn by the promise of food. "He's heading east," Anya warned, her voice calm but firm. "Boris, keep the drums in the center but the horns. Direct the horns to the east, towards the river. Create an echo that draws them there, but makes it seem to come from afar, like a call." Boris nodded, his eyes wide, but his face now showed renewed courage. He gestured to the other young people, and the sound of the horns changed, becoming more focused, a howl that seemed to guide the bears eastward, towards the invisible trap. The bonfires crackled, their flames casting dancing shadows that stretched and shrank, adding to the illusion of depth and distance. Lena, still calling the reindeer, saw the lead bear, a mountain of white fur, emerge from the smoke and shadows. He was at a dangerous distance, his small dark eyes fixed in the direction of the reindeer. She felt a shiver run down her spine, but she did not run. She continued to call, her voice a thin thread of courage against the immensity of the beast. The other four bears, following the leader, also began to move more decisively to the east, drawn by the sounds of the horns and the scent of the reindeer. They were being guided, step by step, to the exact point Anya had planned. The elder could feel the proximity of the underground river, the fragility of the ice beneath her imaginary feet. She knew the decisive moment was approaching. "Keep sounding the horns!" Anya commanded, her voice rising above the sound of the drums and the wind. "They are almost there. The ice. Feel the ice!" She extended her hand as if she could touch the invisible barrier separating life from death, survival from hunger. Her face was tense, but her lips still held that firm line of determination. Her connection to the earth was her vision, and she was using every fiber of her being to feel the exact point where nature would become her ally. The entire village, their hearts beating in unison, watched with great apprehension the dangerous dance between ancestral wisdom and nature's relentless fury. The fate of all hung suspended in Yakutia's icy air, awaiting the inevitable. The lead bear, an imposing mass of white fur, advanced with heavy steps. Lena, from her post, could see it approaching the point where the ice looked darker, thinner. The call of the horns, now concentrated, seemed to pull it. The reindeer, guided by Lena's soft voice, had moved a little to the west, creating an empty space between them and the river. Lena's heart pounded, a mixture of fear and strange excitement. She saw the bear raise an enormous paw, about to step onto the most dangerous area. Suddenly, Anya let out a small, almost inaudible gasp. Her body, previously rigid and focused on the east, abruptly spun to the west. Her blind eyes, which had seemed to see distant danger before, now widened, fixed on something only she could perceive. The scent of the bears, which had previously come predominantly from the east, now intensified alarmingly from the opposite side. A different vibration, faster and stealthier, ran through the frozen ground, bypassing the sound traps. "No, to the west! He's flanking!" Anya exclaimed, her voice cutting through the icy air with an urgency that made all the young people stop. Boris, who was coordinating the drums, felt a chill run down his spine. He looked to the west, but the darkness and the dancing shadows of the bonfires revealed nothing but twisted trees and snow. "Who, Grandma? Where?" Lena cried, her call to the reindeer interrupted by the panic rising in her throat. She turned, trying to see what Anya felt. One of the younger ones, faster. He used the smoke and sound to hide. "He's coming from the flank, near the fallen trees. He's almost there, near the herd." Anya's voice was a tense thread of command. Her wrinkled fingers closed around her staff, and she pointed it to the west with terrifying precision. The young people, who had been focused on the east, now turned in confusion and terror. They could hear the drums and horns, still luring the lead bear towards the river, but the new, invisible threat was even more terrifying. Fear spread like wildfire, and some of the young people hesitated, their eyes desperately searching for a sign of the predator. "Boris, Lena, quick! The wind chimes to the west, shake them hard, and the drums to the west. Create a sound barrier there. Now!" Anya commanded, her voice gaining a strength that seemed to come from within the earth itself. She could feel the flanking bear, its heavy breath, its silent steps in the snow. It was just meters from the furthest reindeer, ready to pounce. Boris, overcoming the initial shock, reacted with a hunter's speed. He shouted orders, and the young people closest to the west, with trembling hands, began to shake the wind chimes violently, creating a frantic rattling. Others, with the drums, changed the rhythm, beating with desperate fury, creating a chaotic wall of sound that clashed with the howls of the horns in the east. Lena, her heart in her mouth, ran back to the center, grabbing one of the abandoned drums. She didn't know where the bear was, but she trusted Anya. Her small fists pounded on the reindeer hide with all her strength, the sound mingling with the cacophony. The reindeer, which had previously been moving slowly, now agitated violently, their eyes wide with panic. Anya remained in the center, her senses divided. She felt the lead bear still hesitant in the east, the ice groaning under its weight, but not giving way. And she felt the flanking bear, now caught by surprise by the new explosion of sound in the west, its charge interrupted by a growl of confusion and frustration. The village was fighting on two fronts, guided by the inner vision of a blind woman. The air was charged with tension, and the night seemed to hold its breath. Watching the battle for survival, Anya's ancestral wisdom was being tested as never before, demanding an adaptability and courage that transcended common understanding in a moment of decisive trial for all. Anya felt the flanking bear retreat, its growl of frustration echoing in the cacophony of chimes and drums. The surprise attack had been thwarted, but the irritated beast intensified its hunt. The elder perceived the vibration of its erratic steps in the west, bypassing the wall of sound. "Maintain the rhythm in the west," Anya commanded, her voice firm. "Push it towards the center. Let's concentrate the threat." Boris, sweating, gestured. Drums beat, wind chimes rattled, creating a whirlwind that pushed the bear away from the reindeer. Lena, beside him, pounded the drum with silent fury, her eyes shining with courage. In the east, the lead bear, hesitating near the thin ice, seemed more confused. The howls of the horns, which had been luring it, mingled with the chaos from the west, disorienting it. It roared with impatience but did not advance. Anya's strategy manipulated the predator's perception. Anya closed her eyes. She felt the pulse of the earth, the wind, the scent of the reindeer's fear, and the wildness of the bears. The flanking bear, cornered in the west, moved south, seeking an alternative route. "South! He's going south," Anya warned. "Boris, prepare the chimes to the south," Lena, you and the young people in the center direct drums to the south. Create a corridor of sound that leads it back to the east, to the river. Lena, without questioning, beat her drum in a new direction. The young people in the center followed, and a wave of sound formed, guiding the flanking bear. The bear, caught between the western barrier and the southern pressure, growled furiously. It tried to resist, but the sound was overwhelming. Reluctantly, it moved east, back towards the leader's area. Anya felt a faint relief. One less bear to flank. The 5 colossi were closer, though still disoriented. The cunning leader watched the flanking bear approach, trying to decipher the situation. "They are together again," Anya murmured. "Hunger will unite them, but confusion will divide them." The next step would be critical. She needed one of them, the most audacious, to be lured onto the thin ice. Boris, exhausted but hopeful, looked at Anya. "And now, Grandma." The elder took a deep breath. She raised her staff. "Now," she said with new authority, "we will give them what they seek, but